So people often ask me, how can I improve my communication skills? If you want to increase your own skills of influence, persuasion, negotiation, and listening, but don't know where to start, stick around, because today I'm going to offer you 4 steps on how you can improve your communication skills. First, start with a self-audit. So this may sound pretty obvious, but I think people often skip this. It's really helpful to get a sense of your own strengths, but also your weaknesses, like what are your growth edges? So what are some specific questions to ask? First, right, how good are you at listening? Second, and related to this, what is the specific data that would support your view? So if you think you're good at listening, let's say, to detailed explanations, but really bad at listening when someone is emotional, like maybe when they're emotional, you move to problem solving. What are some examples which would support your view? Second, and related to listening, how effective are you at asserting your own interests, your own views, your own perspective? Are you somebody who tends to do that well using specific examples? Or on the other hand, do you tend to, on the one extreme, submit and cave in? Or on the other extreme, are you extremely aggressive, right? Assertion is really different from aggression. Related to this, and I think this is really important in a self-audit, reaching out to others you trust and who you think will be honest with you to ask them, what do they see as your strengths and weaknesses in communication? Now, sometimes this could be really hard to do because people don't want to tell you what your weaknesses are. But there are times when you can maybe use some kind of instrument or set up some kind of anonymous way that they can give you feedback. So I have to say, I did this some years ago, and honestly was pretty surprised at the feedback I got. Most of the feedback I thought was consistent with how I saw myself. But there was one piece of feedback that was really surprising. And it was that particularly my friends said, at times, there are ways in which I feel like Bob is trying to negotiate with me when I feel like this is just a friend thing, and that could feel a little bit off-putting. So to give you an example, right, if I'm with a group of friends and we're deciding where to go to dinner, I am somebody who might say, well, what are everybody's interests? And then let's brainstorm some options and let's make sure everyone's happy. And to be honest, my purpose of doing this is to make sure that no one feels railroaded or bamboozled, that everyone feels like that's a place I'm excited to go to. The feedback, though, was that my very attempt to do this made people feel like I was trying to trick them and use some kind of negotiation jujitsu to end up at the place I wanted to go to. And so the self-audit piece is much more effective if we can get feedback from others. There's also really good research that suggests that the most effective communicators, the most effective negotiators, are people who are highly self-aware about their strengths and weaknesses. So if you want to improve, start with a self-audit. Second, make intentional efforts to learn about key communication skills. So learning about skills is obviously different from practicing them, but is incredibly valuable. So there's something about the knowing about that actually helps us be better in practice. So what are some of the ways to do this? Well, there are literally thousands of books out there that teach skills of communication and negotiation and influence. And let me just say, there are almost 300 videos on this channel that teach all about effective assertion, negotiation, leadership, communication, and influence. So if you have not subscribed to this channel, please do so now. It is a great way to learn for free. And then lastly, right, if you're really into this, invest in taking some kind of communication, influence, or persuasion course. I teach them myself through the Cambridge Negotiation Institute, but there are all sorts of ways to do this, both in person and online. Third, Once you have the cognitive knowledge, be purposeful and mindful when you are in practice. So in other words, we can literally be improving day to day, and it doesn't take a huge amount of investment. Here's my most basic advice. Whenever you are done with some communication opportunity, maybe it's making a pitch to a client, maybe it's negotiating with your team, or maybe it's having a difficult conversation with your supervisor, write down maybe 2 things you said or did that you think worked well for you, 2 specific behaviors that you think that was really effective. Next time I do something similar, I want to repeat that. And then write down 2 things you think you should do differently. And the next time you find yourself in a similar situation, just practice those 2 worked wells and those 2 do differentlies. You're going to see much more improvement if you are working on specific micro skills rather than doing 15 different things you read in a book or that you saw in one of my videos. For example, if I'm just trying to be a better listener, I'm going to be much more effective that next time than if I'm also trying to negotiate the process, frame issues well, use criteria, and have a really good process, right? The latter task just feels too overwhelming. So what we notice from our own teaching is that having people focus on micro skills is a much more effective way to see improvement. Last piece of advice is whenever you can, seek out coaching and feedback from others. So, it's really interesting. I often use this example about Serena Williams. We all know that Serena Williams, even though she's now retired, right, is still one of the best tennis players and really best athletes of all time. Now, Serena Williams is somebody who knows a lot about the game of tennis, right? Just like I suggested that you learn a lot about communication and influence and negotiation. We also know that Serena Williams is somebody who's really self-reflective. She captures her own worked wells and do differentlies. But you know what else? Serena Williams also has a coach. And so even though she has an incredible amount of skill and she's incredibly self-reflective, she has decided to invest the time and money to have a coach to give her feedback. And I would just say, whether you are the best communicator in the world or the worst communicator ever, having a dedicated coach to give you feedback is just incredibly helpful. One of the most rewarding parts of my work is working with seasoned senior CEOs and C-suite executives who are already incredibly competent, but they want to get better. And so they know that having me as a coach is an investment in improvement, not a sign of weakness. So to recap, if you want to improve your skills of communication, do these 4 things. First, conduct your own internal self-audit, asking yourself questions about where your strengths lie and what your growth edges are. Second, take the time and energy and effort to learn about key communication skills. You can do this through watching my videos, taking a course, reading books. Third, be intentional and purposeful and mindful when you practice. Cultivate a practice of capturing worked wells and do differentlies for yourself. And lastly, look outward. Hire a coach, seek feedback. If you want to keep on learning how to negotiate more effectively, watch this next video on how to negotiate a higher salary after a job offer. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, and ring the bell to ensure that you won't miss any new content. Okay, you want to keep improving. Click, click, click.